Welcome to the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast, where we are empowering youth female athletes to play and live confidently. My name is Shay, and each week I will bring you new episodes to teach you the strategies and tools that you need in order to live a confident, empowered life both on and off the playing field. Welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I sat down with Sarah Cowart, who is the founder of Sideline Confessions. After spending 10 plus years working in Division I collegiate athletics, Sarah heard frustrations from parents and students regarding the challenges of navigating the NCAA initial eligibility process. Knowing that only 1 in 57 high school athletes go on to play sports at Division I level, Sarah discovered that the lack of knowledge regarding NCAA eligibility rules was just another reason why students were not achieving their dreams. Sarah founded Sideline Confessions in 2019 to bridge the knowledge gap for both parents and students as they navigate the NCAA initial eligibility process. Sarah is committed to seeing students reach their potential, not only in the athletic arenas, but also from any seat in the classroom. In this episode, you will learn when to start preparing academically to play college sports, how to prepare for standardized tests, when to register for the NCAA Eligibility Center, and more. So parents and student athletes, get ready to take some notes because this episode is jam-packed with value and you aren't going to want to miss a single second. Enjoy. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you on today.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know that you are the first kind of academic guru, is I guess what I'll call you. First academic guru on the show. I don't know why I haven't done it sooner because it's so important. So I'm really excited, not only for me to learn, but also for the audience. I think it'll be really, really valuable.
Oh, I'm so thrilled just to talk about all the things that our student athletes need to be doing as they prepare not only in high school, but also going through college too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we dive in, tell us a little bit more about your story and like what you do right now, who you help, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So, I am a former collegiate athlete, but I played at a junior college and then finished out my career after suffering a major injury, just finished out as a regular college student. And then ended up teaching and coaching for a few years before I decided to go back to graduate school. And while I was in graduate school, I found out that there was this role called an athletic academic counselor. And I was like, what is this job? And I'm like, this is it. This is where I belong, is helping students one-on-one navigate all the challenges that come athletically and academically as they go from, high school to college. And I knew that's where I belonged. And so after I finished graduate school, ended up at Penn State and then worked at University of South Alabama and Belmont University and worked with all different student athletes from all different walks of life, all different sports. But what I kept hearing over and over was every time I met with recruits, parents and students always seemed very confused about the initial eligibility process going from high school to college.
Yes.
And there was this missing link. And I couldn't figure out how are we missing all of these steps for all of these students. And they were coming a little bit underprepared, but not only that, parents had so many questions about what could I have done sooner? How could I have helped my students sooner? And so I decided after about 10 years of working in collegiate athletics that I needed to step away from this so that I could bridge the gap. And that's when I decided I was going to build out online courses, one-on-one meeting opportunities for parents and students, and even high school administrators, so that we could really start to bridge this gap for parents and students to fully get them prepared for this transition. And so that these students didn't get left behind, so that they wanted to play a Division I or wanted to play a Division II, they had that opportunity.
Yes. I love that. And so I don't think many people know this about me, but after I was done with my master's, I actually worked in student athlete academic services as well at Utah State. So I did that for a year and I worked with the men's track team. So I don't know why that never makes it into my story, but I have a background with it as well. And even then, I feel like I agree with you. There's so much confusion because I feel like the rules are ever changing and things keep changing and new rules are, implemented and that kind of stuff. So with that being said, like I want to start kind of broad and then we'll kind of narrow it down a little bit. But with, Division 1, 2, and 3, obviously there's different, academic requirements for each one. So give us kind of a broad overview, like kind of a snapshot overview of the different academic requirements for those three divisions.
Yeah. So what we want is, so Division One is going to have the most stringent requirements. What I always tell students is you want to shoot for those requirements.
Right.
That's where you want to aim for. And what that is going to be is you want to have 16 core courses finished. And that's where the students always and parents always get confused because they're like, you say core courses, but what does that even mean?
Right.
And here's the deal. The NCAA has an approved list for your particular high school, whether it's a private school or a public school or even like a magnet school. There's an approved list for your school that you actually have to be paying attention to. And that's a lot of times where things fall through the cracks because students are like, well, I've been taking all these classes and that, they may fall under what we would consider additional courses, but it might not be on the NCAA's core course list. And that's what we want to be so mindful of and really start this process early. And, I always tell students, if you even have like this one thought in your head when you're like 8th or even 9th grade that you want to play college sports, start then. That's when
Yes,
you start preparing for college.
absolutely.
And, and that breaks down to, it can get really nitty gritty to talk about like all the different qualifications because
Right.
you have to have 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science. And then there's all these additional ones where it could be like 1 year of math, science, or English,
Uh,
social sciences, and then 2 years of social science, and then these additional courses. And so that's where I always love to step in with parents and say, okay, let's take a look at that transcript and let's go ahead and break it down to where your student needs to be by their junior year. Because if we can really get it all outlined and say, by your junior year, we are ready to go. Because the kicker is by the start of your 7th semester in high school, which is the start of your senior year, you have to have 10 of these core courses completed.
right. So that's pretty much all of them.
Which is pretty much all of them. And the thing about it is most students don't have a problem with that.
Hmm.
However, if they get into taking some of these like creative thinking classes or
Right.
philosophy classes or anything like that that they're really interested in, that could derail them. And so we just want to make sure that they're getting the best of both worlds.
Hmm. Right. So is that something with like core courses, making sure they're on track? Is that something that they should be having, meetings with their school counselor about?
Yeah. So I always suggest, starting their freshman and sophomore year, they tell their school counselor, hey, I think I might.
Yep.
I have this idea.
Hmm.
And all that does is that just gives the school counselor just like this red flag of, okay, this student might want to play sports in college.
Yeah.
And that allows them to start looking at it. But one of the things I have found, and the reason why I developed my online course and doing some one-on-one coaching is that when we think about our high school counselors, they have so many students that they're working with. They are
Yeah.
very overwhelmed and they're doing so much for us. And so sometimes that core course list could change.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the school itself may have to submit new courses. They may have to do some other things. And so it's having that conversation early really helps them as the counselor stay on top of things, but then also helps the student and the parent take a little bit of responsibility as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit then about like and actually one more thing I want to add to that you said at the very beginning that I want to make sure everyone hears, as you said, always aim for division 1 requirements, right? Because that's the highest. So regardless of what division you want to play in, if you aim for division 1, you'll be good for all three no matter what happens.
Yeah. So, and the thing about it is like Division One has to have that minimum of 2.3 GPA. Well,
Yep.
Division Two, it's a 2.2. So
Yes.
you can kind of see the difference of how that kind of falls and where it goes. And then according to that GPA, then goes into according to where your test scores fall.
Yes.
And so the sliding scale is a little different for both of them. But if we're aiming for that higher level with Division One, we know that we're going to kind of fall in the other ones as
Yeah.
well when we think about Division Two.
Okay, so you said sliding scale. Most people are like, what? What is a
Yeah,
sliding scale?
exactly. And
So talk
that
to
is
us
literally,
about that.
well, and I always joke that explaining the sliding scale is the same thing as explaining offsides to people who don't play soccer. Like that's the exact same thing. And it's really and truly taking their ACT or SAT scores and comparing it to their GPA and where that falls to become that qualifier. And there is a full qualifier sliding scale, a partial qualifier sliding scale, so you can kind of see like where that falls. And there's some things with like Division 1, and there's some things with
Mhm.
Division 2 as well. And like again, I said, it gets very nitty gritty with all the
Yeah.
things that are out there.
Yeah. So basically, sliding scale, the better GPA you have, you don't have to get quite as good of a test score, essentially,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So the goal is to get a high GPA and still try to get a high test score, obviously, right?
Sure.
But you don't have so much pressure on you to like
Oh,
get this amazing test score.
exactly. Right. Because we just want to make sure that we are just performing at our very best. And that's something that we always talk about is knowing that you are doing your very best and feeling that confidence level as you go into not only your high school years, but then also going into that ACT and
Yep.
SAT that you prepared your very best and you're going to do exactly what you need to do.
Yeah. And speaking of, okay, let's go qualifiers, non-qualifiers. So what are those? Like, what do those mean in terms of, being able to play in that kind of thing?
Yeah. So if you are a qualifier for, say, we'll just say Division 1, if you're a qualifier, that means that you can play on the team, you can receive
Mhm.
athletic aid, you are fully eligible. If you are a non qualifier for Division 1, that means you cannot play, you cannot practice, and you cannot get aid. So you are essentially just a regular college student.
Yep.
And so those are the things that students start asking those questions. And that's where we start to get in the conversation of, well, do you qualify for Division 2? Do you qualify
Mhm.
with an NAIA? What
Right.
about the junior college? So those are the conversations because we want to make sure that they're academically prepared for the institution that they're going to enroll in as well.
Right. Because also, too, is each institution has, different requirements as far as test scores to even get accepted into that school, correct?
Exactly. So you could easily still be an NCAA Division 1 qualifier, but you may not meet the standards of the institution that you're applying to.
Right.
So we want to take a good look at that to say, okay, this might be your dream school, but where are you academically
Mhm.
for being prepared for this institution? And how can we make sure that you have the best experience for the long haul?
Mhm, absolutely. Okay, so test scores. When should they start? I guess let's start with studying, right? Obviously, preparing for test scores is important. So when should that process start?
It's one of those things that I get asked that question all the time
Uh,
because a lot of times we hear, well, we don't have this class until, my senior year. So
right.
people wait until their senior year to take the ACT or SAT. And I always encourage my students take it by at least the fall of your junior year. And here's
Okay.
the reason why is because the NCAA is going to take the highest scores
Hmm.
and create what we call your sum score. So if you take the ACT, for instance, and you make, a 20 in the math section, but you do really poorly, like on the English section, and say you make, I don't know, 15,
Hmm.
then you flip flops. And the next time you take it, you make a 20 on the English
Hmm.
section, they're going to take that highest score.
Right.
So I always encourage students go ahead and take it early because the more practice you get at it, the more confidence you're going to have going in for the second time to take it
Yeah.
again. And they're not NCAA is not going to penalize you for
Right.
taking it a second time because they're going to take the highest of those scores.
Yep. Absolutely. So you said fall. Let's take it for sure by fall of your junior year, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, for
So
sure.
if they are taking it fall of their junior year, realistically, when should they really start like studying hard?
Yeah, I would say, anytime when they start having some of these more difficult classes in their sophomore year, they're going to get some really great academic skills, whether it's some of the sciences or the maths that the high school is starting to lean into. And a lot of times it really depends on their high school. Some high schools will flip flop when they offer different like algebra, geometry, or any type of
Mhm.
math like that. And the same thing could happen with like their physical sciences, chemistries, anything like that. They'll flip flop when those are offered. And so it
Mhm.
really
Right.
depends on the school and that student in particular. But a lot of times students will start preparing around their sophomore year to say, well, maybe you'll take like a practice test, or maybe they'll do something, or even like the PSAT if they haven't done that before. And really, that is simply to get them used to having something of a standardized test. Even the practice tests are really great because they will get just an experience of what is it going to be like, what are the questions are like. And these are the things that I always talk even with my college students now, is we want to get in that environment of what is that pressure going to be like. And it's just the same thing as like we practice as athletes. We don't go to practice and just walk through the moves. We practice with full intent as if
Mhm.
it was a game. And this is the same thing as we go into some of these exams and some of these, even like an everyday exam,
Right.
in our classes, we're doing that same kind of practice, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, taking the SAT and ACT, it's stressful, right? There's a lot of pressure, and so I'm sure a lot of the student athletes that you work with, are have trouble, with test anxiety and such and such. So, what tips do you have as far as how to best kind of combat that pressure and the test anxiety of taking one of those standardized tests?
Yeah. The thing about it is a lot of student athletes are kinesthetic learners. That means we learn by doing.
Yeah.
And you can really see that in the way that we respond to things. And I'm saying we because I fall really big into that
Mm, yep.
category. And so I really identify with being a kinesthetic learner, especially when it's coming to these major tests. And this goes from beyond of just standardized testing. This is within taking major exams, midterms, finals as well. But when we go into these exams, we want to really think about it just as if we're
Mhm.
going into like a big game.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we don't put those two and two things together. We all have our game day rituals, everything that we do. Maybe we listen to the same music. Maybe we have some breathing exercises that we
Mhm.
do. And we never run late trying to get to a game. We're always there an hour and a half, an hour early, and we're going through the motions. That is the exact same thing that we want to do when we walk into these big exams, especially like our standardized testing, is
Mhm.
we want to get there early. We want to make sure we have all of our materials. I even think about the nutrition piece of things. We don't go
Mhm.
into these games,
Right.
our final games or playoff games, just lightly. No, we really feel properly. And that's kind of the same thing as we walk into these standardized exams of how do we really get ourselves into that notion of thinking of it in that way. And that's really just changing our mindset.
I love that because I don't think anyone would ever think, "Oh, I have an exam. I need to make sure I fuel properly," right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's the same idea, mentally preparing and physically preparing before games. You have to do the same thing for your test because the more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to be heading into taking that test, which is huge.
Yeah, and those are the conversations, and I can vividly recall a conversation I had with
Yeah.
a student athlete at Penn State, and we were going through, and he had that same thing of, I just feel so overwhelmed walking in. I said, well, walk me through your pregame, your
Yeah.
pre-match ritual, and he walked me through, and I said, well, why can't you do that going into this
Right.
big exam? And he said, oh my gosh, I can. Like, that is something I totally can. And it completely changed the way he thought of the preparation stage. And I think a lot of times we forget we can do those same things
Yep.
as we move forward because that is still in a stress mode, and how we
Mhm.
cope and how we monitor our stress and really become confident in who we are.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's really great. So let's talk NCAA Eligibility Center for a minute. So
Yeah.
first of all, what the heck is it? And then we'll kind of talk
That's
about the process.
yeah. That is probably the number one question. People are like, what is this thing? Where do I find it? And
Yeah.
so pretty much the NCAA Eligibility Center used to be called a clearinghouse, and
Yeah.
that is what it is. It is simply a clearinghouse for all student athletes who want to play ball in college. So everyone has to go through this process. And what happens is all of these students are evaluated academically but they are also going to have to respond to an amateurism questionnaire to ensure that they still fall under an amateurism status. So if there is any doubt, like any thought that students want to play sports in college, they have to go through this. And you could simply, type in eligibility center. It's going to take you right there. And I always recommend start this process their ninth grade year. You can do a free profile. And then by their 10th grade year, we want to go ahead and have the full comprehensive profile. There is a fee for that.
Yep.
But what that allows the student to do is go ahead and get an NCAA ID number. And if they have any contact, or if they're visiting campuses, or they're doing anything like that, and that all depends on their sport and the NCAA recruiting rules. So I want to make sure that we identify that as well.
Right.
Then they have everything there. And plus, the one thing we talked about is them taking the ACT and SAT by their junior year.
Yeah.
If they're not in the eligibility center, there's nowhere for their test scores to go.
Right.
So we want to make sure that they're already in there prior to taking the ACT and SAT.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So what is even the fee now what is it? $50?
I think it's 90.
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh, maybe
yeah.
it was, I don't know. I'm like, it was so long ago when I did it.
It's been quite a while too. The last time I looked, it was $90.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
And I will say, if you are a student who does receive a fee waiver for the ACT or SAT, you can still apply for that fee waiver with the NCAA. So we want to make sure that people know that that is possible.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to hold anyone back from not going ahead and getting that account by their sophomore year.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So let's talk scholarships for a minute. Awesome. What everyone wants to talk about, right? What everyone wants to get. So how important is the academic side, good grades, all of that? How important is that to, in actually getting an athletic and an academic scholarship?
Yeah. So, that's another big question. I think you probably hear that a lot too, is, how do I get a scholarship to play sports in college? Well, I want people to understand that there are two different types of scholarships athletically that students can get. There is, obviously a full ride that you can get, which is going to pay tuition, room and board, books and fees. Now, those full ride scholarships for our head count sports, that is either all or nothing. So on those head count sports, if you do not get a scholarship, then you're a complete walk-on. So we want to make sure that if there is any way to receive academic aid, that we're really preparing for that, because then that is still a chance for you to go to that institution and maybe receive that academic aid. For our equivalency sports, the chances of getting a full scholarship is sometimes very small. So we want to make sure that that opportunity is there, depending on the school, of what kind of aid might be available academically.
Yep. So head count sports are football, basketball. What other sports are head counts?
Football, men's and women's basketball, women's volleyball, women's gymnastics, women's tennis, and there might be one more that I'm missing.
Okay, so then equivalency is soccer, softball, men's baseball,
swimming and diving, track and field, fencing, lacrosse, field hockey, wrestling.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There might be
I know,
some
I'm like, there's so
that I'm
many
missing.
sports.
Oh, golf. Let's not forget golf.
Golf. Okay. Is golf a head count or equivalency?
No, equivalency sport.
Oh, interesting. I would have thought it would have been a head count, but okay, interesting. Cool. So for scholarships then, what is something that the student athletes should be doing to, I guess, separate themselves to really make themselves the most attractive they can possible to the coaches? What can they be doing academically to set themselves apart? Obviously getting good grades, but what else?
Yeah. So when you think about a student and what they're doing outside of just their sport, you want to think about what are the things that they're doing to give back to the community?
Yeah.
How are they fully involved in their town and their city, their high school? What are they kind of doing where they're not, just in I'm going to play my sport and I'm going home. And so that's the only thing that they see. But how are they truly involved as a well-rounded student, because that really is where it peeks through to show their leadership skills and how well of a teammate are they going to be.
Yeah. And with that being said, how important are internships? Do you think schools and coaches look at that as something that's really valuable?
With that, when they see a student who has been part of an athletic team, they
Uh-huh.
have really, really good grades, and they've also had an internship, what that shows is they have those transferable skills that it's going to show
Mm,
discipline and teamwork. And they're really going to be able to say, wow, they can really transition into this college environment, knowing that it is a little more strenuous than what they are probably coming from. And so that shows them that they're able to balance a lot of things at one time and still be successful.
mm.
But I think that also gives an insight into what's life after sports as well.
Okay. Yep, absolutely. So for scholarships, where's the best place for parents to go and learn about different scholarships that all the different institutions offer?
Yeah, so each institution is going to have within their admissions department what scholarships are available, because there's going to be a lot of scholarships that maybe donors have set up for legacy scholarships at that institution. So since every institution is different, I always drive parents directly there first. Head to the admissions page and look there. But then every state is going to be different. So depending on
Right.
each state, there might be some grants and aid that come from the state as a whole that we really want to make sure that students are driving into, depending on where they
Mhm.
live and what they might qualify for, either academically or service related. So each state may also have something as well, which is really important to look at. And a lot of times the institutions will have those listed.
Okay. And this might be like, I just want to be clear because this might be obvious, but might not. That for athletic scholarships, you don't apply for those. The coach gives it to you or they don't give it to you. Right.
Correct. So they
Yeah.
will offer you, if they're going to offer you an athletic scholarship, they will offer that up front. That will
Hmm.
actually be like assigning, you'll have to sign that scholarship,
Yeah.
a national letter of intent, if that's something that you're going to commit to receive that
Mhm.
athletic grant and aid, is what we call it. And then that's going to be the commitment that you have at that institution for that year.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So what do you see as some of the biggest mistakes that high school student athletes make when, as they're kind of going through their initial eligibility and all that stuff?
I think the biggest one is just like not taking it seriously. Like, kind of going through and just, "Oh, I'm gonna get a C in this class, like, it's not gonna be a big
Mm,
deal because I know I can get A's in my other classes."
right.
And then what really ends up happening is maybe they don't get the A's and they get, just a few B's, and knowing that we need that 2, 3, core course GPA, they're relying on some of the courses that aren't core courses to carry them
Yeah,
through. And so then they're really fighting that last year in their senior year of taking
right.
additional core courses to bring up their GPA when they could have probably been taking some other really great, I would say college prep classes to help
Yeah,
them prepare,
yeah,
and I think too, the other thing with that academically is not thinking about how some of the classes they take in high school are going to prepare them for some of the classes they take in college.
very true. Yeah, and too, like you don't want to spend your senior year like scrambling to get the GPA or meet requirements. Like that's not what you want to do. You want to either spend it getting ahead so that when you do go to college, you're ahead, or relaxing a little bit, which is what I did. I was like, oh, I can take these more chill classes and just kind of, prepare and stuff like that. But you definitely don't want to spend it like scrambling. That's no fun.
I mean, and I think you just hit the nail on the head with that one, is where like the spring of your senior year,
Yeah.
having to wait to see
Mm,
that last grade and that last
yeah.
final, like, is this going to be it? Am I actually going to be a qualifier? I've seen that too many times, and it's not any fun. So why, like, let's not put ourselves in that situation.
Right. Not fun for you either as the
That's
coach.
right. That is 100% correct.
Coach and parents wants to like pull their hair out at that point.
Right. Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk resources because, like we kind of have alluded to, there's a lot of information, right? Like we barely scratched the surface, right? And it's still like kind of information overload. So, what are some good resources, websites, stuff like that? Obviously, your stuff. But in addition to that, where else can parents and athletes go to learn more about this and really like set themselves up for success?
Yeah. So I immediately drive everyone to ncaa.org.
Yeah.
Like that is like the immediate place that you want to go. And it says like future student athletes. That's where you want to go. And they have some great handouts that you can look at, and they have some things that you want to make sure that you identify. And then that's where you're also going to find the core course list
Mhm.
for your particular high school. And so any moms that I work with, I make sure they bookmark that on their computer so they can continually go back to that as we continue to meet, like with my students year by year. I say, okay, hey, have you checked out your core course list? Let's make sure we pull that up. That's the one thing that I want parents to have bookmarked on their
Yeah.
computer.
And like with that being said, like how do you suggest that parents and athletes keep track of all of the things, like print things out? Like what are some, I guess, organizational tactics to kind of keep everything in line and make sure they're going down the right path?
Yeah, well, so that's exactly one of the things that I was kept from running into, and so I actually developed a free checklist,
Oh, nice.
and it's basically a roadmap for all parents and students where they can go and download it, and it walks them through freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year, and they can check off each year all of like the major things they need to do. Have they taken the ACT or SAT? Have they gone and met with their high school counselor? Registered the eligibility center? All of that's outlined in their roadmap,
Cool.
and they can either hold that on as a PDF and just kind of look at that, or they can print that out and put it on the fridge.
Awesome. And we'll definitely link that in the show notes so they can kind of get access to that.
Perfect.
But speaking of that, tell us a little bit more about Sideline Confessions and the services that you offer and kind of how you help the student athletes and their
Yes.
parents.
Yeah. So, the first thing I want parents to make sure they have is that roadmap, because that is going to be a very valuable tool that is really going to help them walk through that. But again, the other thing I kept mentioning is that within Sideline Confessions, I saw that there was a gap in the learning process and in the knowledge of what parents knew, but then also what our high school counselors knew. And quite frankly, it is a lot of information to take in. And you alluded to it too. It is information overload
Yeah.
at its best. And that is the thing I always told parents when they came on campus for recruiting visits is like, you're going to leave here and you're going to have so many questions.
Yeah.
We cannot begin to explain all of this to you right now.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do is actually put that into an online course for parents where they have a full range of it at their fingertips. They can log in. It literally walks them through freshman year to sophomore year, everything that they need to do, the questions they need to ask on recruiting visits, the questions they need to ask for their high school counselor, where to find the core courses. I even walk them through how to look at their student's high school transcript so they know what to find. So they're not searching on Google for hours.
Yeah.
These things, and it's in one place. And because the last thing we want parents and the last thing I want moms to have to experience is the stress and anxiety of like missing games or missing practices because they're at home trying to like figure all this out and not wanting to let their student down.
Yeah.
I want them to be able to have one place and one thing to do that. And so I wanted to make sure that that was a resource for them.
That's amazing. Like, I really wish that me and my parents would have had access to that because it really, like, you can waste hours and hours trying to Google stuff and piece stuff together and try to figure out where stuff fits in. So that's amazing that you've created this resource to where everything is like organized and kind of, just laid out really nicely where they don't have to rip their hair out and go gray.
Yeah. And and it has the links in there. So if they're looking for
Yeah.
something, the link is already there. They just click and it takes them right there to it.
That's awesome. And then how else do you work with, because you work with athletes kind of in like one-on-one settings and
Yeah.
stuff as well, right?
Yeah. So there are times that parents come to me and they say, listen, we are struggling with either time management or there's some
Mhm.
things that maybe we've missed some study skills along the way. And so I do work one-on-one with students to do some academic coaching just to make sure that they're academically prepared as they transition to high school, transition from high school to college,
Yep.
or maybe they're already in college and it is overwhelming. And
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
continue to work through that just to make sure that they are all squared away and get everything that they need to get done in the short amount of time that they have.
That's amazing. And that seriously is invaluable because what is it worth, right? A scholarship, your opportunity to play in sports, like that literally is one of the most valuable things you can do for, as an athlete and as a parent. So that's awesome that you've put that together and offered that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's such a joy to see,
Yeah.
students actually reach their potential. And that's one of the things I say is like, students have the potential to like get to where they need to go from any seat in the classroom. It's
Yeah.
just, they need the tools and strategies to
For
get
sure.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about where everyone can find you on social media, your website, your services, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So you can find me at sidelineconfessions.com, and everything is there that you kind of need to know as far as links and what to download. And then on Instagram, we're just at Sideline Confessions, but on Facebook, we're actually Sideline Confessions Auburn. So
Okay.
we'll make sure to get those links in the show notes for you guys so you can find it.
Nice. And then actually a question about the name Sideline Confessions. I forgot I wanted to ask you this. How did you come up with the name and like what does that mean for you?
Yeah. So, it's one of those things. I've spent 10 years standing on the sidelines, many different sports, from Division I football to a national championship wrestling team to even, lacrosse to field hockey, all
Yep.
of those things, to where I've just stood on the sidelines watching these kids go from, just high school seniors coming in the door to graduating college students who've gone on to be doctors and lawyers and teachers and all different kind of professions. But what always happened is the thing that resonated me with the most is the
Mhm.
conversations that happened on the sidelines
Yeah.
and how we could bridge the gap. And not only that, with conversation with the students and the coaches, but the conversation with the parents.
I love
And
that.
so that's where it came from, is Sideline Confessions, because it all happens on the sidelines. And that's where
Mhm.
you move from point A to point B.
I love that. That's awesome. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. That was super valuable for me. It like kind of took me back to my academic days and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember doing all of this stuff. So it was super valuable. I know that everyone listening is going to be blown away at kind of the information and hopefully, we'll take the action steps, that we kind of talked about. So thank you again for coming on. It was awesome having you.
Thanks so much for having me.